Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
Very good. Well, we'll segue here into, so we mentioned that Apple, and Greg in particular mentioned in the newsletter in absentia, that Apple really is the second most important sort of horizontal platform for businesses. And BrightLocal, I think, did an excellent study this week, published an excellent study on, which largely showed that there are no more horizontal platforms that are ranking across the board for, like 3-4 dozen industries. They did a ton of searches. I think it was 20 industries and 20 locations and 2 searches per industry. So a pretty substantial sort of data set. And then they looked at essentially aggregated which directories were ranking in all of those markets or across those markets and categories, and then sort of surfaced those recommendations to anybody reading the article. And so what they found essentially was Yelp still has a presence, a significant horizontal presence in Google search results. Facebook had a pretty significant horizontal presence in search results across categories. Those are really the only two. Other than that, it was very much vertical specific. You did not see yellowpages.com. I think yellowpages.com might have shown up in one of the categories as a sort of significant directory with a presence in Google. Otherwise, it was all vertical by vertical sites. And this certainly mirrors what we've seen in our consumer research. In healthcare, totally different set of directories that we're engaged with, that we're ranking and we're engaged with. Legal, same thing. Storage, same thing. We saw in Europe, obviously, directories were the number one choice for consumers, in particular, Booking.com, the number one click destination for consumers in hotels. And so I think that the really sort of, I think, I know that the listing management companies like Yext and Uberall and everything else, like they've had this sort of go-to-market machine around, oh, you've got to be on all of these sites, and you upload with us one time and we do all this work for you. And really, I think that this data from BrightLocal just shows how important it is to really not so much to care about the number of sites that are horizontal in scope, but to really focus on the directories that Google ranks and that we've seen in our consumer research actually are getting clicks from consumers, and to not just submit your name, address, phone number, and category with the purposes of getting a NAP reference, a citation back to your business so you can rank better in Google Places or Google Business Profiles, but that these directories get real consumer engagement. The ones that rank in verticals get real consumer engagement, in hotels, Booking,
the
as
good
I said,
ones get good consumer engagement.
Right.
I mean, there are crappy ones we saw in the physician field where I don't remember which one was so annoying, people abandon it instantly, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
But yeah, I was just going to say that, but BrightLocal identifies for you. You don't have to do any research. BrightLocal tells you what those directories are in your vertical. So if you are a physician, you can go and see, I should be on ZocDoc and Health Grades and WebMD or whatever the sites are. I don't recall off the top of my head, but vertical by vertical, they've published this data, which I think was just a great service to small businesses and to agencies working in specific verticals. So really a pretty well done study. We've talked offline, sort of quibbling about their definition of informational and transactional searches. They define best, essentially like best coffee shops, as an informational query. I think you and I and Matt McGee on LinkedIn would say that was also a transactional query. So you're really looking at 2 transactional queries. But in our experience and in our opinion, those are the queries that small businesses should be concerned with. They are not going to rank for an informational query, a true informational query, in regardless of category. The big national publishers and the big directories like Yelp are the ones that are going to rank. So I think that to me that was an error in classification, but it actually sort of doubly validated the conclusions of the study about where you need to be.
I think there was a slight error in causation assignment as well with the best queries. They ascribed it to Google's desire to have, broader answers. I ascribe it to the fact that most business websites have not optimized for the word best category, right? I worked with a large medical website builder 6 years ago, he said, all my doctors are calling me and they don't show up for best search. And I said, well, let's just put best in the title tag and see what happens. And they started showing up in all major markets very high because Google wanted the local website there. So I think there is an opportunity here for agencies and small businesses that haven't been doing that. Now, the corollary to that, though, is that we, in certain verticals, best isn't a consideration so much. Like in storage, they care about price and proximity, right? But in doctors, it's a critical question to them. And in lawyers, it's a critical question. So I think the issue of best, needs to be vertically specific, right? Is it relevant to you? The other, and it speaks to why you want to be on these directories, because they're doing good SEO. And this goes back to Will Scott's Barnacle SEO, that the ones that do best are where you want to be, right? So you've always said this, go look in your vertical, in your market, and see who's showing. And that's, to confirm BrightLocal's output here, but you can see yourself who's showing up and add those to your list if they're not already on this list.
Yeah, I think, and there's also, I think, some great sort of competitive. It's sort of a nudge to do competitive research for multi-location brands, because as you point out, look at the directories that have optimized the crap out of their websites, and as a multi-location brand, your store locator needs to mirror the exact site architecture and on-page optimization at the category level, at the city level, that all of these vertical directories are doing. And that's how you as an enterprise brand can actually break into more of these local results. And I mean, I've done a bunch of competitive research in healthcare. That's where the bulk of my consulting clients are. And the number of just awful find a doctor, find a clinic implementations by $1 billion plus healthcare organizations is totally shocking. And they're essentially handing the search traffic to the ZocDocs and the health grades and those types of directories by not optimizing, as you just said, not following the Yelp model of perfect directory architecture and on-page SEO. So,
and good internal linking.
Exactly. Well, I consider that part of good directory.
Part of the architecture. Yeah, I get it.
Yep.
But it's just so key to Yelp, right? I mean, they start seeing a business getting links in some vertical or getting reviews, and that starts accumulating. They start throwing links to that business location, right? So
there's a lot of dynamic stuff happening behind the scenes, for sure.
Right.
So very interesting study. Again, overwhelmingly positive, with the exception of those two nitpicks we mentioned earlier. I think the other big news of the week, I don't know if we really need to talk about it, but SEMrush acquiring.
Can I say one more thing about this study? That when they talk about overall directory presence, so Yelp has 28%, TripAdvisor 10%, then it drops off quite dramatically, 8%, 3%. You need to not look at those averages and take them too much to heart, because in the vertical where a given directory is important, it's important, right? Square foot or whatever it's called, square foot, whatever it's called, the one in storage, critically important. It doesn't show up on their list, but if you're not there in storage, you're not being seen. And and Yelp is 28%, TripAdvisor 10%. That just means a lot of at least TripAdvisor, a lot of the queries were fast food or restaurant queries where TripAdvisor is strong. So don't take that averaging. The problem in local is always around averages. All the data is around averages, and the reality is that local is vertical. It's a marketplace for multiple verticals, and you've got to focus on your vertical to understand this better. Sorry. Next topic.
I was just going to say, well, now that you brought this up, I'll say one more thing from our restaurant research in Ireland, right? We did see Yelp ranking across the board, frequently in the top 3 organic results, and TripAdvisor was there as well, to your point, right? So even though by percentage, sort of horizontally, it was well down from Yelp's 28% in the BrightLocal study, in the category of restaurants, it was there everywhere, as was Yelp. And even though the rankings were very similar for both of those directories, all of the consumer engagement went to TripAdvisor. So if you're thinking about where to ask for reviews, where to post your photos, where to be responding to reviews, trying to prioritize your team's time and your own development resources, TripAdvisor would be like the clear winner based on consumer behavior. And so again, I think that the BrightLocal study is really a great starting point to kind of do this. but you really ideally would be doing consumer research, vertical by vertical. So.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.